Hey, you guys, welcome back. Today begins quarter four, week one, lesson one. So let's get started with our bell ringer. In no less than a paragraph, discuss what humans need for survival. So it's super important that you elaborate on whatever you list for your journal response, because this is preparation, some brainstorming, if you will, for your culminating task. So don't skip over this. You're going to come back to it later. After your bell ringer, we're going to move on to some direct instruction. Our focus will be theme. You'll do a close read and annotation of a poem, and then you will write an analysis, but that will be for lesson 2. So you'll be able to read and analyze the theme poem about surviving difficult times in order to use as a mentor text for writing your own poetry at the end of quarter 4. So let's get started. So theme, what it is. Theme is the message or the meaning. Theme would be the poet's opinion about a thing. Theme would be a writer's ideas about a subject. It's the so what it isn't. Theme is not a single word. So here's the idea, you guys, and I think we mentioned this earlier in the year. Theme is not one word. Survival, for example, cannot be a theme. It could be a topical theme, but it's not a literary theme for analysis. If we address the so what of survival, then we have the theme that we're looking for literary analysis. Theme must provide us with a message concerning the human condition, universal ideas. It's the writer's opinion about survival that matters. So we know the theme is the message. It addresses the so what. It is not a single word. It is not a single subject. It is not a single thing. It's not character. Theme. How do we determine it? So here we go, folks. Pay attention to your titles. When you're doing a close read, you need to mark, pay attention to, write notes about the title, because many times the title is a clue. You can even start by asking yourself, is this a clue? And as you continue to read, you can then determine whether or not that title is actually revealing the actual theme. Second, symbol. Pay attention to objects that appear in your poems. Do they have a purpose? Ask yourself, well, what is the purpose of this object? We know that symbols are objects that represent bigger ideas. So once we recognize the object, we then have to stop and think, well, what's the bigger idea behind the object? What's the so what? Does this address my so what? If so, write it in your notes. Motif is similar to theme. Is usually when we have an object that reoccurs throughout our literature. When you recognize that there's and it's not always a single object. Sometimes a motif can be something like a color. So if a color is repeated, if it reoccurs throughout a poem, pay attention to it. That's called a motif. What do you know about that color? You write in the margins of that text everything that you know about what that color could possibly symbolize, and that might help you unlock the theme. Figurative language. Listen here, you guys. There's like more than 100 different types of figurative language. I'm not asking you to commit all of those to memory, but I am expecting you to Pay attention to the figurative language that the writer uses, and when you recognize it, slow down. What's being suggested there? What can you infer? And write that in the margins of your text, because that too can be a clue to help you determine the theme. Observations. When you're reading, look for patterns. What are you observing the poet doing here in the text? Take note of it. It could even be something that's visual, like a visual rhyme, or the structure of the poem might help us to determine the theme, the way it's presented visually on the page. Experiences. Your experiences, be they anecdotal or inherited experiences, can help you determine theme, but even more importantly, the experiences of the writer. If you have biographical information provided for you, don't skip over it, don't gloss it, because it may help you to unlock the meaning of your poem. Then sometimes we get lucky and the writer just tells us what the theme is. But that doesn't happen too often. Usually they expect us to do a bit of work. And then we have characters. There are a couple of poems that come to mind where there are characters. One would be Helen, which is actually an allusion to the Helen of Troy. I think it's called To Helen, actually. And another poem is Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. I think some of you actually enjoy his work. But paying attention to those characters will actually help you to also understand the theme of the work, if characters are present. And then if conflict is present in the poem, pay attention to it. It's not there by accident. In your notes, in the margins of your text, you'll take note of what you can infer about that conflict and how it might answer the so what for that particular poem. So let's take a look at this poem, No Man is an Island by John Donne. And if you notice here on the left, we actually have biographical information. It says here that Donne was a cleric in the Church of England. And okay, so it seems as though the time that he spent in the church is actually what influenced his writing. It says that in 1623, he suffered a near-fatal illness. So he was inspired to write a book of meditations on pain, health, and sickness. I'm wondering if that's a clue. It's possibly a clue to help us determine the possible theme in his poem, No Man is an Island. It says here that that's from a famous section of his book of poetry that was titled The Meditation 17. Something else that I thought was interesting, it says that he was sick in 1623. He died only 8 years after. Okay, so let's take a look at No Man is an Island, John Donne. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as any manner of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. So, sorry, I have to apologize. My intention was to write on the blackboard here my annotations, close reading annotations, but I don't have a pen that actually works with the screen here, so I'll have to figure that out. Hopefully I'll have that for you next week, where I can actually do a for real model for you. But I'll just talk through it instead. So we see here, no man is an island, entire of itself. Immediately I'm drawn to the fact that this first line is the title. So I'm going to take note of that in the margins of my text. I'm going to write the title is taken from the first line, no man is an island. I'm also noticing that he has his metaphor. He's comparing mankind to an island. And when I think of an island, I think of like isolation. So no man is in isolation, maybe is something that I would infer. So every man is a piece of the continent. So he's again continuing to compare metaphorically mankind to land masses, but this time the land mass is far greater than an island, and he suggests that the island is in fact a part of this greater land mass, explaining why no man is alone, because he's a part of a greater community. And then he goes on to this little piece here, a clod. We know a clod is a clump of soil. So if a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were. So what's interesting here is, for me, what stands out the most is this idea of a clod, a little lump of soil washed away at sea, that it diminishes, that lessens Europe. Europe is lost something. It's lost a little piece of its landmass. Clod is extremely insignificant, it seems. But yet, even in the loss of something so insignificant, Europe becomes less. And then there's a shift here, because he's no longer talking about land masses, he's talking about people. Relationships, I suppose. Well, as any manner of thy friends or of thine own were, any man's death diminishes me. Oh, whether it be your friends or if it was you, that anyone he's saying to whomever he's speaking, I get the feeling that he's speaking to someone, that when any man dies, it lessens him because he's a part of mankind. So therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. So yeah, I think I get it now. I think that the message here, oh wait, tolling of the bell is the ringing of the bell, which usually signals the passing of time, or specifically on occasions when people have died. So I think he's saying to us here that there is an interconnectedness among all of us. And that when one soul passes, when one person dies, that we all die. A little piece of us diminishes. We lose a piece of ourselves. And maybe he's even saying, or we can add to that by saying that that we should not ask for whom the bell tolls, who has died, because it's you. It's you who have died. And whether it's through the passing of time, where you'll meet your own fate, or if it's because of this idea of how we're all together, we're all connected, that there's a shift and a change in the atmosphere when we lose souls, when we lose lives. Like nothing is the same ever again each time a person passes. So I think that's possibly one of our themes here. If it's not the theme, it's definitely one of them. So what's next? Oh, sorry, not what's next. How to find theme. So listen, some of you may still be struggling with this idea of theme, and if that's you, I've provided additional support for you. There's a video here. I want you just to hang in there, take some notes, take some Cornell notes in your writing notebook, and see if this helps you further. So what's next? You're going to do a close read and annotation of the poem, the end and the beginning, which is posted in Google Classroom. So you're going to have to print out the poem, and then you're going to mark the text and take a picture, crop the picture, and then you'll upload it, and there'll be further instructions for you there in Google Classroom. Please make sure that you pay attention to the things that I mentioned for how to determine theme. I expect to see that in your annotations. And also pay attention to your style devices, inferences. I need to be able to see what you're thinking when I read through your notes, poem structure if it applies, unknown vocabulary, and an overall theme statement should